Story Legacy at Ramiro.me, a show for people who want to tell their story, make an impact, and leave a legacy. Personal stories from people. It's the music edition remix. I am Ramiro, creator of Story Legacy, your story guy. And today on the show, we have from New York, David Dachinger.
Love it.
Uh, hey, David, welcome on the show.
Thanks, Ramiro. It is great to be here.
Yeah, grateful to have you here. Now, all right. So, one feedback I got is that viewers want to know if we've connected before or not. So, you and I, we have connected on a call before. So, I know some things about you. I know that you used to be a firefighter. You survived cancer. You're basically born in this whole musical environment, and that was kind of like walking to you, I would say. So, to get a bit deeper onto in your story, so this is the music edition focused on still story and also music and the role music has played in your life. And but one thing in general, that question that I often like to ask is, for you, music related or not music related, what is the biggest challenge you've had in your life so far?
Yeah, I would probably relate it back to cancer. That's kind of where life was good, and all of a sudden, I got the stage 4 cancer diagnosis, and it's like the brakes screeched to a halt. Life, was a whole different ball game because now I'm not able to do my job. I'm not able to eat very well, not able to sleep well, exercise, any number of things. Plus, you've got a diagnosis that looks pretty serious. So it was a challenge, and it was also a gift at the same time, an opportunity to really regroup and do things different, but also to be in a space of choice about how I was going to experience this cancer journey, the treatment, the identity, the partnership with my wife, going through all of it. So yeah, it was kind of a interesting time in my life.
Wow. Okay. So, it was you mentioned that choice how you're gonna experience that, right? So I'm curious. Um, when you first got that news, right, and that brakes that gets that gets pulled and the brakes screeching. So, um, from the moment you realized that and you had to put everything to a halt, to then coming to how fast was that between that and you realizing, all right, how am I going to choose to experience that? Was that instant? Were there many phases in between? How was that experience?
Yeah, great question. It's really a matter of coming to terms with what you just heard, like what your life is now all about. And it looks like this. Like for me, it was numbness, shock, overwhelm, denial, confusion, why I was so healthy and all of a sudden I'm dealing with this crazy cancer. So probably 2 weeks after the diagnosis and the dust started, well, the dust didn't really settle, but we settled into a routine and it's sort of an acceptance or an allowance of, okay, this is what our life is about now. And the only way out of this is through. So let's do the traditional medical treatments of chemo, radiation, ultimately surgery. At the same time, having a lot of time on my hands and really wanting to get through this, as physically and spiritually and mentally intact as I could, I was open to considering anything that would make it more manageable. So that included meditation, yoga, mindfulness, affirmations, changing my diet just out of necessity, and receiving the love that people were bringing to me, that were offered. People were offering their love, and my wife especially was so loving and so caring that it really changed our relationship as well.
Wow. So that's pretty fast. Like from the 2 weeks, then all right, we got some sort of routine, and then getting through this, and then just coming to terms with it. I would say 2 weeks is like super fast. So, I'm curious. in that, right? So you said you took the time for spiritual work, meditation, affirmations, etc. Is that when you got into it, or did you already have the background and the experience in those disciplines?
Right. I did have background, started transcendental meditation in college. I had definitely had exposure to it, different kinds of mindfulness and some yoga practices. However, now as a cancer patient, I had so much time waiting while I was getting an infusion or waiting for doctor's appointments or sitting home recovering between treatments. That was, a choice of, well, am I going to veg out and watch TV, or am I going to use some of this time in a productive way? So I did embrace some of the earlier teachings I had for meditation and mindfulness, but I also explored new things that I hadn't necessarily done before.
Okay, cool, cool. Yeah, nice. So you had the space to go explore and go deeper on certain things, right? I'm curious. You mentioned that the frustration that came from, not being able to work, for example, right?
Yeah, yep.
That and then you have so much time on your hands. Then what do you do? I veg out, or do I do these spiritual practices? And what do I do? And was that especially related to work and other things you love doing? Was that also was it a period, for example, maybe in those 2 weeks or the first month, where you really accepted that and that let that go, said, all right, I'm not able to work, I'm not allowed to work, and let that go? Or was that kind of going up and down and always coming back, like that kind of um, yeah, a little frustration, but the different preference to work instead of having all that free time? So was it like a period and then acceptance and never again, or was it still like waves coming back and forth?
Yeah, it's definitely a process, and it definitely happens in waves. And it's a roller coaster. You're up and down some days, feeling really crappy some days, and at the end of a chemo cycle, you start to feel better. You can do more stuff, kind of get more active, feel a little more normal. But it's almost like the stages of grief, coming to terms with all these new, elements that have come into your life that there's no way to prepare for it. I don't think there's any way to prepare for it other than just take them as they come, take each day as it comes. And as someone told me, which really helped, was like break it down into bite-sized chunks, like, just take it one step at a time, be very, deliberate about that, and then just be where you are. If you're in, having a bad day and feeling grief and feeling loss and feeling like, in a really negative, dark place, sometimes you just need to be there, kind of let that emotion move through and pass, and then get to the next place, which could be the next day or the next hour.
All right, cool. Thank you. Now I'm curious. In that time, right? How did music play a role in that period? Because especially like music's also been your work, right? And so I'm curious how that relationship or how that element of music fit in or wasn't present during that time. And but before we get into that, tell us a little bit more about your musical background. Now we have space and time, so you can start from the beginning of your whole musical journey. Because I know you have a long journey. We can go deeper. There's space and
Okay.
time.
Yeah, yeah. As you mentioned in the beginning, I was born into a family of music educators. So for me, I was immersed in music. My mother was a music teacher. We had a piano in the house. We had all kinds of interesting, exotic instruments in the house. My grandfather had a music conservatory. He was kind of an inventor and an author and wrote music kind of instruction books. So I got it, from an early age, and I was encouraged to play different instruments, to just play around with composing music, to improvise, to I get exposed to a lot of different kinds of music, classical, jazz. Once I got older, rock, pop. Kind of. I was fortunate enough to kind of be alive during Woodstock. I was young, but I still listened to all that stuff. The Woodstock album, watched the film, and there was some amazing artists at the time. So after I got old enough to start being in bands, I was playing different instruments in bands, playing stuff like Led Zeppelin and Cream and Deep Purple, and kind of got off track for a minute. But I had this very pivotal moment when I was getting ready to go away to college, and I had a high school girlfriend who I had written a song for, and I wanted to make it into a 45 RPM record. So at the time, you could go to a recording studio that had a disc cutting lathe in it, and it must have been fairly inexpensive because I was a high school student and I was able to afford it. I went to this place to get the record cut from this tape I had made for my girlfriend. I walked into the recording studio and had this like moment of, this is what I want to do. I want to be in the recording studio. I want to be a recording engineer. I want to be part of this amazing multi-track process where you have all these inputs and all these instruments and you're layering them and overdubbing them and then mixing them. So that really put me in a career path of being a recording engineer. However, I decided to go to college and get a degree in composition, kind of to keep the music piece intact. And then once I was through with college, to pursue recording engineering as a mixer, engineer, producer.
Wow, I love that you have that specific moment of inspiration. And one thing I love is how one thing, that relationship with your girlfriend, you wanting to have something special and to make cut a whole record just for that song. You would not just do a live performance, but create a whole record for it. How that led to that experience of getting in the studio and then having that, yeah, and that beautiful moment where you realize this is what I want to do. This is what you want to do. All right, so you still go to so you still focus on composition to have that musical element in. And so I'm curious with that, right? So your mom was a musical teacher, and your grandpa also had music as part of his profession, right? So for you, was there any moment of decision where you really had to consider choosing a profession in the music industry, or was that already kind of natural because of your environment that it was a given? Of course, you're gonna pursue a profession in the music industry, or was it really a conscious choice and that you had to make and were debating between other things?
Yeah, so very insightful question. Sometimes I think we have to, maybe some of us have to get away from what it is that we're really, meant to do. In my case, I actually decided to go pursue the career path of an airline pilot. It was my father's side of the equation. He worked for the airlines, and so I did go to college for a couple of years for aeronautical engineering. Miserable, did terrible. Wasn't enjoying it. Was really having not a fun college experience. But I was spending my spare time playing music in a band, and rented an organ and playing and writing music. And it took a girlfriend in college who said, "David, what are you doing? You love music. Why don't you pursue that?" So I'm like, yeah, I guess. Why didn't I think of that? So I shifted gears and switched schools to Berklee College of Music in Boston. And it was almost like going from, the TV being black and white to the TV being in color. Once I got to Boston, enrolled in Berklee, got together with friends of mine, put a band together, started touring New England colleges and fraternities and resorts with the band. That I was in my element. Now I'm, kind of back on track with music and as a musician, but, loving what I was doing and feeling like that was who I was supposed to be.
Nice, beautiful. One thing I love about that little detail in going to pursue aeronautical engineering. I had a similar experience. Well, not my dad wasn't in that line of work. I for some reason randomly just chose after high school to go do aerospace engineering, and I got there, and one of the first things the teacher said was, "All right, if you're expecting to come to get rich from this, you're in the wrong class. And everybody's going, yes, yes, we don't care about no money. And then I'm looking, what? I think I'm in the wrong place right here. That was the first day. I stayed with that for a year. I wasn't. It was miserable. I wasn't succeeding doing well, and then I switched to automotive engineering. But still, the thing is, the difficult subjects that most people had a challenge with, I was able to pass, and the easy ones that you just have to memorize, they didn't interest me. So I definitely feel you on that with the going into aerospace, aeronautical engineering. How long did you do? Did you do it for more than 1 year?
Really, I was there for 2 years, but the first year I really, was immersed in taking the full course load. And then after that, the second year, I'm like, I'm not digging this at all. I think I cut down to 2 credits, which was just band and orchestra. And the rest of the time I was, being more of a musician than an engineering student.
Nice. All right. Cool, cool, cool. All right. So,
And there, just since you brought that up, one thing I did do during that time, which was also, I think, pivotal for me, was I became a DJ at the college radio station and got exposed to a whole lot of new music that I never had even knew it existed through different DJs. And, we would get probably 25 records a week and kind of sorting through, listening to the records. So definitely the experience of being in a radio station environment, being kind of exploring new music and sharing it out and picking the cuts I wanted to play on my show. That was actually a very, in hindsight, a very important element of my musical career.
wow. So you were the curator in that role of for your college as a radio DJ, right? And one thing you mentioned, someone else reminded me of this as well. Like great musicians have a wide palette of musical genres and exposure that they're exposed to, right? So for you, if you look at that time, what is one type of music or one genre or one style that you would say was very influential for you as a musician still today, and that most people don't like or it's not popular or don't know or aren't exposed to?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Certainly classical music was an early influence and it carried through, and I still wound up, it became an important element for me to have some understanding of later in my career when I was composing music for television. Classical music for sure, and I'd say also more, sort of Asian, Middle Eastern music in terms of the rhythms and some of the tonalities. Those, maybe not in a very obvious way, have been a influence, but I've always enjoyed listening to them.
Okay, cool. Thank you, thank you. I'm just curious to widen my palette as well. So, let's see that, and then in the bands that you were playing, right, with such a variety of instruments that you're able to play, which roles that you usually have, which instruments would you usually take in the band? Were you also a vocalist? What, I'm curious.
Yeah, I've never been blessed with good singing chops, but usually I would be keyboard player, bass player, and then later, sort of in those Berkeley years, I focused on sax and flute and really enjoyed being in a horn section for quite a long time, and played on some projects, like studio projects with bigger horn sections. Ultimately, later on, I even played bassoon in kind of an electric setting where I was playing out in, busking out in Italy and Grand Central Terminal in New York. So it really was kind of always oscillated between bass, keyboards, woodwinds, and then some combination of those.
Okay, cool, cool, nice. Oh wow, such a variety. And then you have the whole uh, the production side, the audio engineering part, which is yeah, just a completely different discipline within the whole music creation process, right? And you just mentioned also for creating music for television. So how was that? Was that fun? Was that less sexy? Was it a new challenge? Well, how was that experience?
Yeah, this came out of for quite a long time after Berkeley, coming back to New York, and really wanting to be in New York City part of this is kind of where I really wanted to pursue my dream of being a recording engineer and putting it all together, kind of looking back to that moment in the studio when I went to have the 45 RPM record cut from my girlfriend. This was like, okay, I've got the music degree, played in bands. Now I want to put it all together, become recording engineer, and do that, produce and mix. So I moved back to New York, found a gig at a smaller studio in Greenwich Village, but it actually turned out to be a beautiful place to be because it was owned by two musicians, and the artists and the writers and the producers that came through there we were all in the same kind of trajectory. We're all sort of, on our way, moving up in our careers, kind of getting set in New York, getting established in New York. And that set me up with a couple of clients who moved on to bigger and better things. And fortunately, I was part of their next stage, whatever that was. Some of it was traveling to Argentina and Mexico and Miami to work on records. And that led to connecting with some R&B and funk producers, working on a lot of really cool records in that idiom for major record labels. And after doing that for a decade or maybe longer, I started feeling a little frustrated creatively, like, this is cool, but the hours are crazy. I was doing like all night mixing sessions and coming back the next day and doing another crazy, mix session like day after day. Getting paid was never fun. Sometimes it was very difficult. It was a struggle to, kind of pester people to get paid. Sometimes, even have to take them to small claims court. And so I was ready for a change, and I decided that was going to be writing music, get back to my roots of writing music. So connected with a guy I knew from high school who was doing music for, I think it was ABC Sports. And kind of immediately got some airplay with him doing that. And we wound up over the years building it into a very successful little operation where we were supplying a lot of music for CBS Sports, for PGA Golf, for the NFL, for NCAA basketball, March Madness, and the Masters, which is a huge golf event every year. So that's where this all kind of came together: the technology, the classical music, being sort of an avid sports fan, and wanting to be more creative.
Nice, nice. And of course, the professional side of finance and being able to work with people who have their shit together and work on they pay on time. That was also a nice change, right?
Well, it's funny, I always joke that in the music business, there's like never a shortage of ways to get screwed out of getting paid, right? It's like, I would say it got easier because now I'm looking at you're getting your income from a royalty stream rather than invoicing record companies and producers and, who have like a net 60 days or net 90 days. But even the royalty stream has its share of challenges, and sometimes that's like, the documentation that has to go into the performing rights organizations doesn't get done on time or correctly or ever. And so it takes a lot of, sort of detective work sometimes to make sure that you do get paid. However, it did smooth out the crazy ups and downs of trying to get paid as a freelance recording engineer. So, it was a very satisfying time, especially because now I was not only working with music and audio, but also there's a visual component. So to me, that became very exciting to underscore that. Sometimes, it's basically like the dynamic, epic kind of sounds you would hear for a movie trailer was what we would write for the opening for an NFL game or a big, the Super Bowl or something like that. So actually, at some points, I got to work with, actual orchestras and do recordings in, nice big studio in New York City to kind of capture the, the essence of a live orchestra.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I see it. It's the whole soundtrack that accompanies the sports events to add more drama and make it more entertaining. Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Oh, And I love that what you mentioned, that that transition was that accumulation of all those things, the composition, becoming more creative, pivot within the music industry, and still, and also even having the technical, audio engineer aspect built into it as well, but not just be the main focus, and just having that whole holistic role. Oh, nice. All right. Cool. Cool. I'm curious. Within just, I want to zoom in on the mixing discipline,
Mhm.
the audio engineering discipline for a bit. So as far as I know, you have the main components are like the recording itself. So that has to do with, of course, sound, audio. I mean the equipment and all the settings to record it, right? And then you have the mixing and mastering. So are those the three general big tasks and skill sets within audio engineering? And where did you really specialize? Did you do all of it?
Right. So yeah, I did it all, and I did started doing it at a time when it was very much analog and very much kind of a labor intensive thing to record an album. We would meticulously mic, the instruments, because most of the time we had a live rhythm section, and so you have all the multiple drum mics trying to isolate the drummer from, say, the guitarist and the piano player. And now, with a lot of musicians in the same room kind of waiting to get started, you have to be very organized and sort of deliberate about having a good setup to get a good sound rather quickly, and then make sure it all gets captured on tape in a way that's going to sound good when you go to mix it. So the elements that were always common starting out were those, initial rhythm track sessions, bass, guitar, drums, piano, percussion, maybe. Then the overdubs, the vocals, the horns, the other percussion, sweetening of whatever, strings and woodwinds, and then the mixing, which could be a marathon sometimes. And then sometimes we did a little bit of kind of mastering, but typically we take it to a mastering house to have them do that piece, because then you have a second set of ears kind of getting, their perspective sometimes is very helpful if you happen to be in a studio where you maybe weren't a little too bass heavy on everything, and they can handle that in mastering and do a couple other things to smooth out track to track and make it kind of a very homogeneous sounding album. But it is a lot of different elements go into being a mixer engineer. Obviously, some of that's changed with digital recording and less live musicians, but the principles are the same. And I enjoyed transitioning from analog, especially traveling around sometimes with multiple reels of 2-inch tape. Sometimes I would say we had 20 reels of 2-inch tape, and we're dragging them with us to record an artist down in Mexico or Florida, Barbados. I remember taking quite a few reels down to Barbados, and now all you've got to take is a hard drive. So it made the digital Pro Tools era made life a lot easier in terms of the logistics. And but it's what I love it is, with whether you're a musician or an engineer, there's so much to know, so much to learn, so much to discover and experiment with, and rules to break, places to go that you've never been before sonically. So it's endlessly fascinating and creatively so much fun for me after doing it for quite a few years.
Yeah, yeah, definitely endless exploration, and it's a lifetime adventure. And what you just mentioned, I see how that all of that, just the recording alone, to have that be set up in such a way that is will be optimal for mixing and as efficient and productive as possible. I see it takes a lot of genius brain power. So I see those skills and that going on. All right, cool, nice, nice. All right, cool. So I was curious about that, and then it makes sense that to also to avoid that yeah, burnout or that bias of in mixing, to have someone else do the mastering, so
Hmm.
that Yeah, the marathon was good enough. Let someone else do,
I
do
have a
the
good
marathon.
story about that one too.
Yeah, tell me.
So I went to Argentina to record two records. It was more like one and a half record. One of them was this artist who was huge. I would call him the Billy Joel of Argentina. And so we recorded literally everything, the rhythm section, all the overdubs. You know, we're there recording nonstop for about 2 weeks. And then we went into mix mode for his album and this other. And we probably started at 10 o'clock one morning and went around the clock and finished up like the next morning around 10 o'clock. And I can tell you that at that point, you know, I was cross-eyed, dizzy, you know, hallucinating probably. I was probably seeing pink elephants coming out of the ceiling because I was so fried. And this was such a rush job. It was like, okay, now we're going to go right to the mastering studio and master this thing because we have to release it. So, okay, we go, you know, now I can just go to the mastering studio and just sit back and listen. So I get there and they had, you know, Argentina was at the time not that sophisticated with some of their equipment. They had these speakers made by JBL and they put the record mix on it and it sounded absolutely horrendous, right? I had mixed it on my own monitors, which I was super familiar with, and now I'm hearing it on these other speakers and I'm like, oh my God, this sounds terrible. So I'm like, what do I do? I'm fried, I'm burnt out. Do I trust my speakers and just tell them, don't do much to it, just, you know, maybe just smooth out the dynamics a little bit, don't EQ it? Or do I trust that this monitor setup in the mastering room is going to actually be, you know, true? I decided, look, I know my monitors. I don't want to mess with this. Just, I asked the guy, do as little as possible. And it worked out to be the right decision. But, you know, when I was in that state of extreme exhaustion, it was kind of a, you know, a very a difficult moment for me to, you know, figure out what the right thing was to do. But in hindsight, it's funny to think about it.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Thanks for sharing that. And I love how you trusted your gut, trusted your intuition, and your own skill set. No, I know my process. I trust my monitors. Do as little as possible. I love that. Yeah, but I can imagine you already have a whole marathon, 24 hours, and now what do I do now? Coming out, the sound coming out of those GBL speakers. So yeah, but I can
Yeah, and they
imagine.
were
Yeah.
like, you know, they were like PA speakers almost, you know, like these, they used to be called lenses, but they were like these louvered tweeters that you would normally, you know, well, you may have seen them in studios, but they were harsh and definitely not accurate speakers.
Okay. Oh wow, cool. Okay. So let's see now. Okay, so that's in the engineering part. Then coming back to the music, etc. So when you so I'm curious, two questions I have right now. What line of work profession were you doing when you got that cancer news? And second, where does the firefighting come into play?
Yeah. Well, I'll answer your last question first. After living in New York City for 20 years, our daughter was getting to be school age, and we decided to move just north of the city to the suburbs. Happened to buy a house right next door to a firehouse. So immediately I'm thinking, wow, this is going to be, could be noisy. It really could be, you know, not fun to be next to a firehouse. But somebody I ran into invited me to a barbecue there. And I went to the barbecue, met some of the firefighters there, and they invited me to a fire drill. And I'm like, all right, you know, I'll check it out. No real interest, but could be, you know, something really different. So I went to the first drill, and I'm slowly kind of getting interested in this whole thing. They're like lighting, you know, pallets of wood on fire and going in with fire hoses to put it out as part of their drill, the training procedure. So I went to another drill and another, and next thing I know, I'm totally hooked on the firefighting thing. And to fast forward a little bit, I was able to, I was blessed to be hired as a career firefighter and later promoted to lieutenant. And so I was midway in that career in 2013 when I went to the barber. The barber said, "What is that on your neck?" And he pointed to a lump that I had no idea was there. I felt perfectly fine. So I realized I got to get this checked out. and that took me to some doctor's appointments with scans and biopsies, and the eventual diagnosis of stage 4 cancer. So kind of midway in my fire career, and at the same time I was still doing my music, writing the music. So the beauty of a typical fire schedule is that we worked 24-hour shifts, and had days off in between, which is when I could work on music. So both of those careers with the diagnosis of cancer kind of went, put on hold for a couple of months, 3-4 months.
So you just went to a barbecue and ended up becoming a firefighter.
Yeah, buying a house next to a firehouse. I mean, who knew,
Yeah, and loving the drills. Yeah, I see some similarities here, with just you talking about the drills, and I already saw the complexity that comes into it. The high pressure needs to be efficient, effective, and I see the similar genius brain work that comes into play with in audio engineering and in that phase. And so I see those similarities. My guess is that's probably one of the things you love about it, that whole challenge of a puzzle that needs to be solved, kind of, right?
Yes. I mean, it's interesting you bring that up, Ramiro, because at times I would think, there are similarities between firefighting and music. In music, we sometimes get on stage and jam with other people who we've never played with before. We're in that live moment where, it's not set in stone. You're kind of in that flow of like anything can happen. You're in this place where the public doesn't typically go. You're on stage and the public is in the audience. And just those things, I realize, okay, as a firefighter, we're going into the scene of an emergency where the public doesn't go. Sometimes we're with people we don't work with all the time. And we're certainly in this flow of like anything can happen, and we need to kind of like come up with a solution to it in the moment. So I think there was those similarities too that drew me to firefighting. Although the one thing that I found the hardest when I compare it to writing music, I'm on my very comfortable studio space on my Pro Tools rig. When I'm writing music, I can hit the undo button. I do something that's not right, I want to change it, I just hit undo, start over. In the world of emergency services, you basically have one shot to get it right, and it's sometimes literally life or death. And that becomes, it can be very stressful to realize that there's a lot of responsibility in doing that job.
There's no undo button. That's the biggest difference. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I can imagine. You talked about, the one more thing that I saw when you talked about the 24-hour shifts. I was looking at the 24-hour mixing marathon in Argentina.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's another similarity. I mean, it can really be long hours. And sometimes when things get busy in fire departments, could be a storm, could be, they need to hire overtime for summer vacations. You can wind up working crazy number of hours, just like I remember working crazy hours in the record business.
Okay. So now a few things that I'm curious about. One of the questions I asked that led into this last bit that we talked about is during that phase of when you were taking time to heal, you were coming to terms that you were not able to do those two careers, making music, writing music for profession and the firefighting. Did you still explore and play with music, either instrument in another way that wasn't tied to work?
I would say during cancer treatment, not so much, but when I finally got through all of it and started to get detox and sort of heal from all the treatment, one of the things my wife and I realized is we need to like lighten up, laugh more, have more fun. And that's when we would like put on the stereo as loud as we wanted with Earth, Wind, and Fire, say, and just get up and dance, right? And so I was kind of revisiting my funk roots from going to Berkeley and playing all those college gigs where we played funk, and now bringing music back into my life a little more as a dancing participant rather than the musician, but music was so, I'd say, key in healing and kind of lightening up and getting out of that dark energy of, cancer, chemo, radiation. It was more like, okay, I'm alive. Let me feel, let me enjoy it. Let me have some joy. Let me really move physically, move my body in a joyful way with this incredible music.
Nice. All right. Cool. So you went more from the from each kind of transition from the producer creator side to the consumer enjoying it and
Mm.
being yeah. I love that. All right. Cool. Yeah. So the dance. Yeah. That's so fun. All right. Nice. And uh, so during that time, you were still living next to that same fire department where you work.
Yeah, I didn't actually work at that firehouse. I went up working at a different place, but yeah, I was still living there, and it was, to me, it's, I don't know, it's kind of a beautiful part of the existence in a way. Like sometimes, we have neighbors we don't know, or we have, live in a neighborhood where we're not familiar with what's actually going on. Well, the firehouse was like, it was like so cool because it's like a hub, like a community hub, and there's things going on there. And I knew the guys that all work there, and there'd be events there, barbecues, summer parties, fire fairs, and that kind of thing. So it was, especially having kids. For them, I think it was a really cool thing growing up, and for me, it was really, I had this connection with it where, I was always happy to know they were next door.
Oh, nice, nice. Okay, yeah. My first assumption was that you worked at that one, but
Hmm.
it was still a fun
Yeah.
community center in the neighborhood. All right, cool. Then let's see. You had that, and during that kind of phase, is you mentioned that that challenge of going through the healing of cancer, etc. It really was an opportunity and led to you and your wife coming closer together, right?
Hmm.
And I know with that opportunity also comes a big challenge where it can go the opposite way, right? So is there any specific moment that comes to mind that you really cherish and think about in that period that helped really made it so that you both grew closer together in that experience?
There was a number of them. One thing that we did on a fairly regular basis, and it was so beautiful, we would go for walks where, and I credit my wife Tamara for this idea. We'd go for walks and we'd do these things called a gratitude walk, where we would sort of, how you trade licks in music. Well, we would trade gratitude phrases like, I'd say, well, I'm grateful that our kids are happy and healthy. And she would say, I'm grateful that we have friends that are supporting us all the time. And I'd say, I'm grateful that I, have health insurance through the firefighter job. And it's amazing how powerful that is to shift, especially when you can get into that dark negative place of, cancer victim, I have cancer, life is a drag because I'm not able to work or eat or do my normal, routine. That shifts the whole focus and really puts you not only to the now moment, but also just makes you realize, there is always something to be grateful for.
Beautiful.
Mm.
Now, thank you for sharing that. I have with some relationships and some friends. I have what I do the walk and talks, and we walk through a city or wherever. Sometimes just in the yard, we
Mm.
do circles, and we just have these deep conversations. And but you just made it a little bit more nuanced, making it a gratitude walk, not just walk and talk. So gratitude walk, and
Mm.
to exchange things for grateful for. Beautiful. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Thank you. All right. Then mm, we talked about like how music, there's so many different avenues and so many different options, and it's endless creativity, right? So I'm curious, you as a musician, how often do you still keep practicing your instruments? And I know you told me that you're playing with some new flutes now and you're exploring that. So how is that for you, the practice? Are you always practicing? Do you have phases where you stop? How is that in terms of the expression through the specific instruments?
Well, I've I've been practicing more recently, and I have this incredible motivating factor, which is that I was invited to play on Christmas Eve at Carnegie Hall, and with some amazing musicians. The music director of Earth, Wind and Fire, and Paul Pesco, who's an amazing world class guitarist, and now I'm like, I got to get my chops up to speed for this. So I have been practicing on a very consistent basis, and in the last month or so, and will continue to do that. So I sometimes need a kick in the butt, to practice. And part of what's exciting about those native flutes you mentioned is that I've been getting them from some indigenous craftsmen in Peru, and we plan to go to Peru in December, where I'd love to get some lessons from them, kind of learn their approach to playing the flute, and learn, maybe there's alternate fingerings I'm not aware of, and definitely, get more into the spirit of playing the flute, not just the technical part, but like, how do they tap into, this spiritual piece of playing that I may not be aware of, and I totally want to, learn about that.
Nice. Thus, again, expanding your musical palette and experience, and diving into more creative parts and connect even on the spiritual aspects of it. Beautiful. Nice. All right. Cool. Cool. Thank you. So you sometimes need a kick in the butt, a gig to get to start practicing. You got a purpose. I got a gig, especially with
Well,
with
that's
certain
what's
people.
what the best part about it is that old joke. They asked, the question is, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? A guy's lost in New York. He's like, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? And the classic answer is practice.
All right. Cool. All right. I wanna go into something else a little bit. We haven't talked about this yet. We haven't touched about it in this conversation, but you did mention it before in our other conversation, and that was that you're getting more into sound healing, right? And using sound for healing. When did you get into that?
So when we reached the moment in our cancer journey when I got the all clear, that I was cancer free, Tamara and I realized that we wanted to pay it forward and to create something for cancer patients and caregivers. That took the form of a book and also of an app where we created meditations, activations, guided imagery. And now I was changing my direction with composing music to doing music that's going to be supportive, to give people a space to kind of de-stress, to get calm in the middle of a stressful cancer diagnosis or being a caregiver for some loved one who's got cancer. So I started looking at sound in a different way. How can this shift people into a calm space? And, I don't purport to know how to heal people with sound exactly, but I at least want to make their mental state more relaxed and less anxious. And so that we've created dozens and dozens of these meditations, which are of different lengths, and typically they have music, they have a visual component, and they have a voice guiding the meditation.
Oh, nice. Okay, so basically, because of that, you're wanting to pay it for, you're inspired to take the tools that have really helped you and even evolve them and create them specifically for that with more intention. All right,
Yep.
cool, cool. Okay, cool, beautiful. So I'm curious. If I ask you now, like through those challenges, well, let's say that if we take especially the cancer challenge and all the things, kind of what we talked about and those transitions in music as well. To you, what are the biggest lessons you've learned from your experiences so far?
It's to go through the open door, because sometimes those doors open and we hesitate or we decide not to go through them. In my life, every time I've gone through an open door, even if it was like stepping out of my comfort zone or something that just didn't wasn't consistent with what I thought should be doing, is sometimes, well, most of the time, if not all the time, has led me to something amazing I couldn't have imagined. And that's, we sometimes think we know exactly what we're supposed to be doing today and tomorrow and beyond that. Sometimes we don't. We have to, at least in my case, I respect the fact that there's probably some greater intelligence out there who's got my back and who is presenting me with these opportunities to expand and to make a difference and to be of service to humanity. So that's one thing, and the other is, and this kind of touches back on the undo command on the computer, that not to edit so much, that some of the greatest little moments I've ever had writing music have been what you would think of as a mistake. And if I didn't delete it immediately and played it back, sometimes it was like this, it wasn't even me. It was something that came through me, some brilliant flash of creativity that I never would have thought of, and the key word being thought of, because it's not a thinking process. It's this, it's a flow process. So I'd say that sometimes mistakes are actually the most beautiful moments that can happen during music.
Nice. Get rid of the undo button. Oh, beautiful. Thank you. Just on that, is that's one of the that's the reason why I do these recordings live, these shows live, to have that spontaneity and also that opportunity for chaos. I remember a dance teacher. Someone told me it was during this dance workshop in dance, and it relates to anything, but in the context of dance where I heard this. The difference between a beginner and someone who's advanced dancer in any discipline is their relation to chaos. A beginner gets in the chaos. Oh snap! I did it wrong. Oh shit! No, it's not supposed to be like this. An advanced practitioner, they find the chaos and they go, "Ooh, this is something new. This I didn't know this could happen," and they discover new things and play with that chaos, which makes it just more alive, more intuitive, more natural. And also that this reminds me of whole thing in creation and what you mentioned, not editing too much, and especially with how to do recorded things. If are they all perfectly tuned and on beat, etc., or are they played by live musicians where you have those little imperfections that make it more human and give it more depth, right? Thank you for that. Yeah. All right. Cool. Cool. So I usually end with before we and I one final question I left to ask, and you probably just answered it right now, but just for emphasis sake, the question I like to end the show with is, for people today, tomorrow, 1,000 years from now, if you have one message to share with them, or maybe two, what message would that be?
Yeah, I would say it's that same example I just gave you. Go through the open door. That sometimes what's on the other side of it may not be exactly what you're expecting or what you have conceived, it's supposed to look like. But sometimes there's a greater plan out there that we're not even aware of. And if we embrace that and are open to it, man, it can lead to some amazing, amazing opportunities.
Beautiful. Thank you. And like you said, do less of the undos.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Then now I'd like to ask you, since this is the music edition, invite you to perform something for us. So I'm curious, what you gonna do? So you mentioned to me before the show, you wanna play with that flute, right? One of the Peruvian flutes.
Yeah, I'd love to do that.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, if you wanna give us an intro or just start whenever you're ready, go right ahead. Wow, beautiful. Oh, that was a nice surprise. I love how that starts with a certain vibe and it just gets into this whole other zone and just energetically and then bringing in the beat, make changing up the energy and then sandwiching it, ending up with that vibe that started with. It's oh man, beautiful. Thank you for that.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah, this was Story Legacy at Ramiro.me. So, David, now we're going to end on a kapow. You know how now? Kapow!
Kapow!
All right. Nice.